Hey, I get a lot of questions about doing payroll as a bookkeeper. So I'm just gonna chat with you guys kind of briefly today about what experiences I've had with payroll and some of my thoughts and recommendations on it. So there's kind of two options as a bookkeeper. You can do what I call like manual payroll, and that's where you're in QuickBooks, all the employees of your client you add in there as an employee. And then every month when you run payroll, you would do a series of steps. So that would include putting in all their wages, taking out the appropriate taxes, sending that tax money to the right places, and then filing the right forms with the IRS. As well as in QuickBooks, you're gonna have to put that money in different places. So with some of the tax money, there's a little bit of a delay of when it actually comes out of their paycheck versus when it actually is sent into the IRS. So in QuickBooks, that goes into kind of like a holding-ish account where it's not really the client's money anymore, but it's still sitting in their bank account for a little bit of time. And so in bookkeeping, that's called a liability. So you need to put that money in a liability account. And so if this sounds a little like overwhelming and confusing to you, you're not alone. A lot of bookkeepers are right there with you, including myself. I actually took a class maybe like 4 years ago, specifically about payroll, because I thought I was gonna want to incorporate that as one of my bookkeeping services. And actually that class is what made me not want to do manual payroll. And even the teacher of the class was kind of like, there's a lot of moving parts here. And the other thing he mentioned is that the tax rates are changing a lot. So you really have to be on top of that. So if something changes, like if the government changes something, you need to go into QuickBooks and make those tweaks also. And like with anything, I think things seem overwhelming when you don't completely understand them. So I'm sure there's some of you bookkeepers out there who are really good at payroll and love it and have a really good process in place. Let us know in the comments if you do manual payroll. I'm really curious to see if anyone does it. And if you have any resources or like how you learned it, because I'm pretty curious to know that. And I'm Morgan from FinePoints.biz. I have a free masterclass and checklist you can check out for bookkeepers and starting your bookkeeping business. And if you've had this question about payroll, I'd love it if you give this video a thumbs up. That really does help out my channel a lot. It helps YouTube show this video to other people. And of course, subscribe by hitting the red button down below if you want to see me talk about bookkeeping each week. I would love to have you. So what I do instead of offering that manual payroll as a bookkeeping service is I communicate to my clients that they need to have a payroll service. So this is a service they pay for each month, and the price depends on how big the business is. And of course, there's a variety of payroll companies, but the fee is somewhere between like $50 and $200 maybe around the $100 mark per month, because usually there's a base fee and then you pay per employee. So QuickBooks actually has their own like payroll company, or like, they'll do the payroll for you. Or there's other options like Gusto, ADP, Paychex, and a bunch more. And when you're looking for a payroll company, if you use QuickBooks Online, make sure it's one that will sync with QuickBooks Online. I have the most experience with Gusto, so I'm just gonna be referring to Gusto as the payroll company. And then also in your mind, that'll help you remember, oh, it's a little bit separate from QuickBooks. And a quick note about Intuit QuickBooks payroll service. I've heard mixed reviews about them. I'm sure there's tons of people who are using it very happily, and I don't usually put tons and tons of stock into complainers. But I will say on bookkeeper forums, it's not usually the #1 payroll service that is recommended by bookkeepers and loved by bookkeepers. So let's say I had a newer client and I wanted to set up their 3 employees within Gusto. You just make an account in Gusto and it really walks you through the process. It tells you step by step, how many employees do you have? What benefits do they have? What are their tax rates? And then it will send the employee an email also to set up their account and put in some of their own personal information. They can do direct deposit and all that kind of stuff. So I definitely feel like you and your client can figure out how to set up stuff in Gusto. It's pretty intuitive. But the time that you are going to earn your money and you're worth your weight as a bookkeeper is every month there is that sync I talked about. So Gusto's calculating all those taxes, all those benefits, taking out Medicare, taking out Social Security, they're doing all that calculation, and it's gonna give you these lump sums. And when you sync it into QuickBooks, it creates a journal entry for you. And so it's a pretty complex journal entry with 10 to 15 line items. And it has all of that stuff behind the scenes that you didn't have to deal with, and it syncs it in there. But as part of the setup process, you as the bookkeeper are going to have to tell Gusto which QuickBooks accounts that you want everything in. And if you've never done this before, you might want to get some help, do some research. I'm not going to get into that nitty-gritty of details in this video. Let me know in the comments if you would like a video on how to sync and map, it's called, map Gusto or a payroll company to QuickBooks. But for example, I talked about earlier, there's that liability account. So part of the taxes that are being withheld from that payroll account are a liability to the business. And so in QuickBooks, you have a liability account named something, named liability 3 or something. And then so you need to tell Gusto, whenever you have this type of money, put it in this liability account called liability 3. Same with wages, that's going to be an expense to the business. So you're going to have an expense account in QuickBooks. And you tell Gusto, every time Joe Smith's wages come out, it's going to go into this expense account. So that's why when you have that really long, complicated journal entry I was talking about, that money is going to be categorized in different places within QuickBooks. So that can be a challenge, I'm not going to lie to you. And I will say, I don't even think this is my strongest suit as a bookkeeper. But the good news is, once you map that once, every month it'll remember that, and so you don't have to keep doing it. It's just gonna know, okay, I have all this money siphoning into these different accounts. Thankfully, at the end of the year, my accountants were like, everything matches penny to penny from Gusto into QuickBooks, which is what you want. Other things to think about when you are using a payroll service is that payroll fee will come through, that like $100 or so that I mentioned. And so oftentimes that's a different transaction in QuickBooks. So just categorize that to an expense. It's just an expense of doing business. And then benefits too is a whole nother ball game. If your client does matching to like a 401k or a IRA, all that information is going to be in Gusto. And at certain times of the year, your client will have to pay that matching check. They'll have to actually take that money and pay it into those retirement accounts as a benefit to their employees. So you can see the bigger the businesses get, the more complex, the more things they have going on. Just like having a payroll company doesn't mean they're doing it all for you and it's super easy on your part. Like there are still tasks that you need to do and things you need to monitor as a bookkeeper doing payroll. I will say, depending on how big your client's business is and what the structure of their businesses, sometimes they can hire contractors. And that does require less payroll work because you just pay contractors a set amount and you don't have to take out all that benefits and all that taxes and stuff. That is easier on you as a bookkeeper or that business owner. And if you have a mix of contractors and employees, you can pay them all through a payroll company. Gusto is set up to do that. You just mark someone as a contractor and then it gives them a 1099 at the end of the year. So hopefully this gave you a starting overview of payroll. There's a lot to think about. Let me know in the comments what questions you have about payroll or if you have any good resources on where we can go to even learn more about payroll. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for a new bookkeeping video every week. Thanks.